James Harper, 42, a successful architect, had just completed one of the most significant projects of his career, a luxurious seaside resort. Yet, behind his professional triumphs lay a man struggling to fill the gaps in his personal life. His divorce 2 years ago had left a deep scar. He no longer believed in love, preferring solitude where everything was under control. His dream, to find peace, but without the fear of losing it all again. Caitlin Miller, 38, a talented photographer specializing in landscapes and portraits, had come to their small seaside town for work. Her photographs often graced the pages of renowned magazines, yet she felt she was constantly searching for something elusive, as if life itself whispered that another important story awaited her. She was convinced her best work was still ahead. Their first meeting happened by pure chance, at a bookstore. James was searching for a gift for a colleague, while Caitlin stopped in to grab a travel guide. They bumped into each other by the shelves, and their simultaneous apologies turned into a lighthearted conversation. It was rare for James. He wasn't used to sharing with strangers, but something about her smile, her simplicity, made him open up. That evening, they shared coffee at a small cafe, and Caitlin showed him her latest photographs. Their relationship blossomed quickly. They strolled along the shoreline, discussed books, movies, and dreams. James admired her ability to see beauty in the smallest details, while Caitlin found solace in his reliability. One rainy evening, James invited her to the rooftop of his newly completed resort. Through the mist and glowing streetlights, the town looked like a living painting. "This is my favorite view," he said, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. In that moment, they both felt their connection was extraordinary, as if fate had given them a second chance at hope. For months, their happiness seemed untouchable, like a dream they both feared waking from. Yet, even the clearest skies can darken. James began noticing small shifts in Caitlin's behavior. She started working late more often. Her voice carried an unfamiliar tension when she answered his calls. When they were together, she was present, but not fully. Her once bright laughter was replaced with polite smiles, and James found himself wondering if he was imagining the distance between them. The first real crack came on a rainy Friday evening. Caitlin had promised to meet James for dinner at his favorite little Italian restaurant, but she called an hour before, apologizing with an uncharacteristic edge in her voice. "I'm so sorry, James. I'm stuck on something for work. Rain check?" He told her it was fine, but the disappointment clung to him like the dampness of the storm outside. Later that night, as he scrolled aimlessly through his phone, a photo popped up in his social media feed. It was from his brother Ryan. The caption read, "Great company makes the hardest days better." It was a harmless enough post, but the accompanying image caused James's chest to tighten. Ryan was seated at a bar, smiling broadly, and next to him, unmistakably, was Caitlin. James stared at the screen, willing it to make sense. Perhaps it was innocent. Perhaps Ryan, ever the charming extrovert, had simply bumped into her. But why hadn't she mentioned it? Why the lie about work? The following week, things between James and Caitlin felt off. She was attentive yet distant, as if performing the role of a perfect girlfriend while hiding behind a carefully constructed wall. The breaking point came one Saturday afternoon when James stopped by Ryan's apartment unannounced, needing to clear his head and talk to someone he trusted. He knocked, but when no one answered, he tried the door and found it unlocked. Inside, the scene that greeted him shattered his world. Caitlin was there, her face pale with guilt, and Ryan stood nearby, frozen like a deer caught in headlights. For a moment, there were no words, just the sound of James's heart pounding in his ears. "How could you?" he finally choked out, his voice barely above a whisper, directed at both of them. Caitlin stepped forward, her eyes brimming with tears. "James, don't," he said sharply, the pain twisting into anger. "I trusted you. I trusted both of you." Ryan tried to explain, his usual confidence replaced with stammering apologies, but James didn't stay to hear them. He walked out, leaving behind the two people who had once meant everything to him. James drove aimlessly through the city that night, the rain beating against the windshield as if echoing the storm inside him. His mind replayed the scene over and over, Caitlin's tearful face, Ryan's stammering excuses, the suffocating silence that followed. Betrayal was too small a word for what he felt. It wasn't just about love, it was about trust, family, and the profound sense of belonging he thought he'd found. He pulled over at the park near the pier, where he and Caitlin had shared their first walk together. The memory struck like a blow, her hand in his, the way she laughed at his corny jokes. How could something so genuine turn into this? By morning, James knew he couldn't avoid the confrontation. He returned to his apartment, his heart heavy yet resolute. Caitlin was already there, waiting. She looked as though she hadn't slept, her eyes red and swollen. "James, please," she began, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to hurt you. I don't even know how it happened." "You don't know?" James's voice was sharp, laced with disbelief. "You don't know how you ended up with my brother, Caitlin? Spare me." "It wasn't planned," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "Ryan, he was there for me when I felt lost, and I made a mistake. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know how much I regret it." James stared at her, searching for something. Sincerity, perhaps, or an explanation that would make the weight of her betrayal lighter. But all he saw was the person he had loved and trusted, now a stranger standing before him. "I gave you everything," he said quietly, his voice breaking. "Everything I had left after the divorce, after losing myself for so long. And you gave it away." Caitlin reached for his hand, but he pulled back. "James, please, don't let this be the end. I made a horrible mistake, but I love you. That hasn't changed." James shook his head, his jaw tightening. "You don't betray someone you love." Ryan, too, tried to make amends in the days that followed, sending messages and showing up uninvited. But James couldn't bear to see him. How could his own brother, the one person who had been his constant through every storm, betray him in this way? The pain was a wound that refused to close. James tried to move forward, but the days blurred into each other, a monotonous haze of work and sleepless nights. Every corner of his apartment reminded him of Caitlin, her favorite mug by the sink, a photo of them smiling on the mantel. Even the air felt heavier, as if it carried the echoes of their shared laughter and whispered promises. He avoided Ryan entirely, refusing to answer calls or read his messages. For James, the betrayal was not just a breach of trust, it was a loss of identity. He had built a fragile sense of self on the foundation of their love, only to see it crumble under the weight of lies. Weeks turned into months, and James withdrew from everyone. He spent long nights walking by the shore, the waves crashing against the rocks mirroring the turmoil inside him. Once, he stopped by the park bench where he and Caitlin had shared their first kiss. A stray dog wandered up to him, resting its head on his knee as if sensing his sorrow. For the first time in weeks, he smiled, albeit faintly. One day, while sorting through old boxes in his attic, James stumbled upon a journal he had kept in college. Flipping through the pages, he read the dreams of his younger self, designing homes for the less fortunate, building spaces that healed rather than just housed. He hadn't thought about those dreams in years, consumed instead by the relentless pursuit of status and wealth. The next morning, he made a decision. He reached out to an old professor who ran a nonprofit organization focused on sustainable housing projects. "I need a change," James admitted over the phone. "Something meaningful." To his surprise, the professor invited him to a project in the mountains, far from the city and its painful memories. The work was challenging but fulfilling, and the quiet of the wilderness gave him space to reflect. He began to find fragments of himself he thought had been lost. During one of his weekly supply runs to the nearest town, James overheard two women talking at the local diner. "Did you hear about Ryan Harper? Terrible accident. He's in the hospital. Barely made it." James froze, the coffee cup in his hand trembling. It had been nearly 6 months since he had last spoken to his brother, but the thought of losing him was unbearable. When James arrived at the hospital, he found Ryan pale and hooked to monitors, but conscious. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither spoke. Then Ryan's voice, hoarse and weak, broke the silence. "I didn't think you'd come." James hesitated, his emotions warring within him. Anger, sorrow, regret. But seeing Ryan like this, vulnerable and human, stripped away some of the bitterness. "I couldn't not after hearing what happened," James finally said, his voice soft. Ryan nodded, tears forming in his eyes. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm sorry, James. for everything. I never wanted to hurt you." For the first time in months, James felt a crack in the wall he had built around his heart. Forgiveness wouldn't come easily, but perhaps this was the beginning of something new. Not for Ryan's sake, but for his own. James hadn't planned to stay in the city, but Ryan's recovery was slow and uncertain. Days turned into weeks as James found himself shuttling between the hospital and Ryan's apartment, ensuring his brother had everything he needed. Their conversations were brief at first, heavy with unspoken pain, but as Ryan's strength returned, so did their honesty. One late evening, as James adjusted the pillows on Ryan's bed, his brother broke the silence. "I've been thinking," Ryan began hesitantly, "about us, about why I did what I did." James tensed, unsure if he was ready for this conversation. "You don't have to—" "No, I do," Ryan interrupted. "I was jealous of your life, your success. It wasn't Caitlin. It was never really about her. It was about me. I wanted something you had, something I thought I couldn't find on my own." The admission hit James like a wave, forcing him to confront feelings he had buried deep. For years, he had seen Ryan as the golden boy, charming, carefree, and loved by everyone. But hearing his brother's vulnerability, James realized they had both been blind to each other's struggles. "It doesn't make it right," Ryan added, his voice cracking. "But I need you to know how sorry I am, for everything." James nodded slowly. Forgiveness wasn't instantaneous, but this moment felt like a step toward healing. Just as James began to find stability, life threw another curveball. One morning, he received a call from his professor at the nonprofit organization. A devastating earthquake had struck a small village where James had helped design a community center. "We need you," the professor said urgently. "The buildings held up, but the people. They need someone who can organize, rebuild, and guide. Will you come?" Without hesitation, James agreed. The project was grueling, coordinating relief efforts, designing temporary shelters, and comforting villagers who had lost everything. Yet amidst the chaos, James found a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive. One evening, while working under the dim glow of a generator's light, James heard a familiar voice behind him. "Looks like you found a way to build something unbreakable." He turned and saw Caitlin, her camera slung over her shoulder. She had come to document the recovery efforts for a major publication. For a moment, their eyes met, filled with unspoken memories. James didn't expect to see Caitlin again, let alone here, in the heart of a place so marked by tragedy and hope. She stood quietly, her camera hanging at her side, as if waiting for his permission to approach. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the weight of their shared past lingering between them. "What are you doing here?" James finally asked, his voice steady but guarded. Caitlin took a tentative step forward. "I'm covering the recovery efforts for Global Insight. When I heard about this place, I didn't know you'd be here, but maybe I hoped." James exhaled, his thoughts racing. There was so much he wanted to say. Questions, accusations, even gratitude for the good times they had shared. But now, face to face, the words felt unnecessary. "I'm not the same person you knew," James said, breaking the silence. "And I don't think you are either." Caitlin nodded, a flicker of sadness in her eyes. "I don't expect forgiveness. I came because I wanted to thank you for everything you gave me, and to say I'm sorry for what I took." James looked at her, searching for any hint of insincerity, but found none. Her apology wasn't an attempt to rebuild what was lost, but a step toward letting go. "Caitlin," he said after a pause, "I loved you, and losing you, the way I lost you, broke me. But I think I needed to break to become someone better. So, maybe I should thank you too." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. "You always deserved better," she whispered. "I hope you find it." They stood in silence for a moment longer before Caitlin offered a faint smile. "Take care of yourself, James." "You too," he replied, watching as she walked away, disappearing into the crowd of volunteers. As the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, James felt a strange peace settle over him. He didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long time, the questions no longer weighed him down. Months passed, and life in the mountain village gradually returned to normal. Homes were rebuilt, families reunited, and the community center James had designed became a hub of activity and hope. watching children play in the courtyard and elders gather for evening chats. James felt a quiet pride. He hadn't just built walls and roofs, he had helped rebuild lives. One morning, as James prepared to return to the city, a young boy from the village approached him with a gift, a small, handmade wooden bird. "It's for you," the boy said shyly, "because you helped us fly again." James smiled, his chest tightening with emotion. "Thank you," he said, holding the bird carefully. It was a simple gesture, but it felt profound. Back in the city, James found himself with a renewed sense of purpose. He reconnected with old friends and started teaching at a local university, mentoring young architects who shared his passion for meaningful design. One evening, while visiting an art gallery, he met someone new, a woman named Emma, who was curating an exhibition on sustainable living. They talked for hours, finding common ground in their love for creation and connection. Emma wasn't like Caitlin. She didn't ignite fireworks or sweep him off his feet. But with her, James felt something deeper: calm, trust, and the quiet thrill of possibility. As they walked out of the gallery together, James glanced at the horizon, where the city lights met the fading glow of the sunset. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he was at peace with that uncertainty. Sometimes life breaks us in ways we don't expect, but those fractures can let in the light we need to grow. James had learned that love isn't about perfection or guarantees. It's about resilience, understanding,